All right. I want to welcome you guys. I'm Glenn Brooks. I'm a journalist. I have another national show called Vibrant Living. We're doing a series right now on vibrant immunity. I've been a Saab fanatic, I don't know, since the 70s. I was in a Saab. My life got turned around. I got into my first Volvo, but going into a Saab, the quality of the drive, the uniqueness, the feeling, the culture. Everybody I met that owned a Saab was a very unique, creative person, and the car reflected I just was in. I knew this was my car for life. And I've had the honor of meeting many mechanics nationally. And so welcome to the Saab Travel Show. We have master mechanic for over 35 years, Scott Rizzon from Vermont, Dorset, Vermont, who's amazing.
Rizzon.
Chris Rizzon. What did I say? I said Scott, didn't I? I transferred names. Okay, he's really Scott. He's really Chris. He's been my mechanic over a decade. He'll be here to answer your questions. All years, questions. I refer people all over the country to Chris. So he's our in residence master tech, Chris Rizzon, Dorset, Vermont. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, glad to be here.
Of course, Scott Paterson, who's the founder of SaabNet, a great friend, appreciator, love. The community we have on SaabNet is amazing. The how we reach out to each other. I bought all my cars on SaabNet. And I've had the greatest experience with the original owners and people that still feel this car is, has many, many years to go, properly maintained. So I guess, Scott, let's do an open check-in, an open question. And if you want to say anything about your relationship to Saab or you're new to Saab, it'd be fun to get a little bit of a feel of why you're driving a Saab. So with that, I'll open up the lines.
So Glenn, I know that
yes.
right off the bat that
yes,
Dick has a question. Dick, are you still? Hang on, let me just unmute him. Dick, okay. I think has a question right off the bat. Do you have one, Dick?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hear you.
I can.
All right, because I switched over from phone to my computer here. So, Scott, did you get the question that I sent you?
Yes, I did. Let me look here real quick.
My question comes off of that, depending on the answer to that question.
Yeah, shall I read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Dickie did email me a question. Here it is. I have a 1986 Saab 900 Turbo SPG. I think the Saab ended up with one of those defective wire harnesses that were ordered from another supplier in 1985 and overlapped into 1986. I have not been able to get my tachometer to work. The clock and light works on the module, but the tachometer does not work. The signal is okay from the distributor and then going through the ignition amplifier and fuse box and then to the tachometer. I've tried different instrument clusters with no success. Is there any way to run a wire directly from the distributor to the tachometer? I realize it sounds oversimplistic. Replacing the wire harness is not what I want to do. It's expensive.
Chris.
I believe the signal comes from the module, the ignition module. So I know you can bypass the amplifier. It's not really needed. But if the signal's getting all the way to the to the tachometer itself, it seems like it must be in the tachometer, but I don't understand why you could.
No. Where does the signal originate? I thought it originated from the distributor.
Well, I mean, it's the distributor. The module controls the distributor sends a signal to the module, and then the module sends a signal to the tachometer.
Well, the folks that have all the meters, I'm not doing this, but they tell me that they've replaced all the wires, and the proper signal is coming from the distributor. Nothing wrong with the ignition amplifier. That's what they call it. I think that's
the amplifier,
whatever. And I have tried two different instrument clusters, and I've tried two different modules, just putting the clock and the tachometer module in an existing amplifier. So my clock works like a charm,
right?
And the light. So I'm getting the power. I'm thinking, well, why do I need to be jacking around with all these other things? Let's just run a wire from the distributor to the tachometer and be done with it. Is there something wrong with that?
I'm not really sure. I mean, it seems to me that, if they say you got to, obviously you must not have a signal at the tachometer. So, I mean, I guess you could run a wire. I wouldn't even bother going to the distributor. I'd probably just go from the module. I'm not sure which pin it is, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that.
Now, when you say the module, you mean the
the amplifier.
Is that what?
Yeah.
Same
yeah.
thing? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll try it. Thank you. I haven't tried that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you find the signal from the distributor to the amplifier?
Yes.
And it's there?
Yep.
It's just not getting to your pack.
Well, yeah, because my first suggestion was, well, let's put a different distributor on. And he said, no, there's nothing wrong with the distributor. It's sending the right signal.
If there was a problem with distributor, the car wouldn't run.
What about the amp?
Well, yeah, but he said, didn't you say you tried 2 of those or no?
Yeah, they put a working amplifier on it, the ignition amplifier.
So I would say that the problem is somewhere in between there and the tachometer.
Yeah.
So the hot wire would go from the amplifier right to the tach. Yeah.
Unless there's something in between there.
There is a I forget what they call it. There is a relay in there, but I remember years ago we used to just bypass that the relay in the fuse box. I forget what it's called, and it wasn't really necessary.
Yeah, you don't turn it on and off.
Yeah, it's not really a relay. It's something else. I forget what they call it. Mm-hmm. But I mean that is bypassable.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
You're very welcome. This is the Saab Travel Show with I'm Glenn Brooks, Scott Paterson.
Here, I got a weird question for anybody. I'm sure the answer is no. Having worked on SaabNet for over 30 years now, I had a classified ad come in today, and I'd never seen this Saab model before. Let me just bring it up. Have you ever heard of? Where is it? There it is. A 1984 Saab 900 Turbo EAG. It is and that is supposed to mean exclusive appointment group. It's not a hatchback. I thought, okay, maybe they mean SPG, but it's not a hatchback. Right. It's a turbo. It's a sedan, 4-door sedan. I'm pretty sure. Let me just look at the photo. 4-door sedan. Anybody ever heard of an EAG?
Yeah, actually, I have, Scott.
Really?
Yeah.
Who is that?
If this is Alan. If you have an actual brochure from 1984, you can look in the back of that brochure, and it will actually reference the EAG. It's an upgraded type of package, kind of similar to the SPG, but not with as many performance mods. So
I took a look at
the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I took a look at the photo, and it looks remarkably like my 85 900 sedan. I don't see any. There's no side skirting, so it must be maybe performance upgrades or interior upgrades.
Yeah, a lot of it had to do with the interior upgrades, like cloth as opposed to leather. The leather and also the colors were a little different. So if you upgrade it to an EAG package as opposed to cloth, you'd be getting leather. Also, there were some colors that they look similar, but the names were actually different between the cloth and the leather.
Well, that's the first time I have seen that referenced in all the time I've been involved with Saabs. That's really interesting information.
What year was that again, Scott?
1984. It's a 1984.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't heard of it either. Chris, you haven't heard of it?
Nope. I can't say as I have.
Okay. All right.
You know,
All right. Well,
this is Dick again, Virginia. I had a brand new 85, and didn't the SPG come out in 85?
Yeah, it did.
Well, I noticed that there's no red box on an 85 SPG, and there's no red box on an 86. But when it gets into 87, 88, wouldn't they stop SPG 91, something like that?
Yeah.
That's what there's a red box, and I said, well, I've got a red box. I think I'll put it in my 86. Oh no, you've got to change the distributor and.
No, I don't think you do for the red box.
You sure?
Yeah, yeah, because that used to be an accessory you could purchase. You could purchase the red box on the ones that had the black box. Now the last couple of years, I can't remember exactly. I think, well, I'm not even sure if they did it on the SPG. I think it was the last the anniversary edition. They did have a different box. Well, I think it was 93. I'm not sure, but they had a different box and different distributor and I can't remember, a different fuel pressure regulator, and that had 185 horsepower. The red box I think was only good for another 10 horsepower, like from 165 to 175, something like that.
I think that might have been that commemorative edition. I had a 94.
Yeah, the commemorative edition, I think, was the one that had the 185 horsepower, which you could buy all the stuff for that, you know, if you had an upgrade another car at the time.
Yeah.
There is
if you had a regular turbo.
There is a red box APC for sale in the classifieds, and it rung a bell. He does mention it came off a 1993 commemorative edition, and it comes with what he says is the correct distributor to get the extra horsepower out of the APC.
Yeah, it ends in .10. Some of them end in 06, 08, 10.
Yeah, he has the one on the classifieds ends in 010.
That's right. That's the one you need for that. Okay, well, I'm going to put the red box on too. Why not?
All right. What's any open Saab format here? Any questions about or curiosities about any model, challenge, or you're wondering? You're just wondering about a car, Saab. An open question line with Master Saab mechanic Chris Rizzon, Dorset, Vermont. By the gorgeous area, Dorset. I drive a couple hours just to see Chris. Works on all these cars.
This is Paul out in Buffalo, New York. I have
welcome, Paul.
Thank you. I have a 2000 convertible Vegan, and I'm looking at the driver's seat cracking and starting to open up. I'm wondering if anybody has a good resource for refurbishing or replacing the leather on a Vegan seat, driver's seat, of course.
Chris?
I'm not sure. There is a place that does do Saab seat covers. Unfortunately, I don't have the name right now. And I don't know if they do the vegan one or not, but I know they do it for the classic 900s and other cars too. But I don't right now have the name of it offhand.
Is there
You
a
could
way
also,
you can put that information?
I was going to say,
or, yeah. When Chris can get it. I'm not having much luck finding anybody.
What's that?
I'm not having much luck finding anybody.
Yeah, you know where there was a guy out in California that had a 9000 that he was redoing. I can't remember his name.
are you talking about the guy we had on like a few months ago?
Yeah, he was on. He was on,
okay.
and he's the one who had the
yes,
the site for those seat covers.
Yeah.
I think it's
so I don't have that, but I'll get to Scott as soon as I have a resource. This is a few months ago. He totally restores the Saabs.
Yeah, and I went on the site, and they do have all kinds of seat covers, and actually they're pretty reasonable for leather. You know, that's, and I have it written down someplace, but I don't remember where it is, to tell you the truth.
I don't either. I've been in touch with him, but his thing was that you could take an early 80s or 90s or even 2000s, and he totally would restore it. He would do everything that you had, almost like almost retro gold, basically. Now you could also check out Goldwing. See what Goldwing. I think it's Kyle over at Goldwing. You could ask him. He works with us. He has a lot of retro stuff, and I guess it varies on his ability to get things, but he's another great resource. Kyle at Goldwing, goldwing.com. Use Saab parts.
Yeah, well, I'm very familiar with Goldwing. I've purchased before. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I can try him again. I think I asked him
Okay.
last year.
This is can I chime in here? This is Morton, Southern California.
Please.
So I would check with Oreo, what's the remains of Saab in Sweden, right? That sells the spare parts, because I heard that they're making seat covers for Saabs again on demand, right? Depending on what's popular. So might be worth checking. Definitely for the newer 9.3s, they are available because they crack all the time. Wouldn't surprise me if they are available, because they have started producing them again somewhere in Sweden.
And what's the name of the company?
Oreo.
Yeah, it's kind of the official Saab parts outfit.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
They do have some.
That's I think it's thesaabsite.com.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that sells Saab parts in the U.S. is kind of sourcing through them, because that's where the parts come from in Sweden, right? So the Swedish government took over the part distribution, so that's still running, right? And that's where the parts are coming from. So there are parts, right?
Okay. Okay.
So for some reason, I picked up some leather parts from Estonia, of all places, right? So I don't know the background of this, but it seems like this guy in Estonia has new leather parts for Saab, and he ships them directly to the U.S.
That's great.
So that might be worth checking into. So it could be that that's where they are made, in Estonia somewhere, possibly.
Thank you, and let us know if in fact you find a seat or seat cover, a custom one, and as soon as Chris lets me know, I'll pass it on to Scott if we could find the as a resource. But the guy, I believe he's in the, I think he's in the Santa Cruz area.
Are you talking about Jeremy Martin?
Oh boy, now I'm stumped. He was on a while ago.
Yeah, it's Jeremy. Let me see.
Okay.
Santa Cruz powder coating too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he had a very unique way of restoring, and then also doing like paint and.
I don't know if he sold it yet, but he has had his modified 9000, upgraded 9000 for sale in the classifieds. But I'm just looking up online real quick if I can find him. It's called.
Thank you for thanks for the info suggestion.
Yeah. Jeremy Martin. Yeah, you can reach him at. It's called Powder Coat It. It's Santa Cruz, California, and the website is Powder Coat It SC for SantaCruz.com. Powder Coat It SC, and I think I have his email address. Let me just see if I have that too. 1 second. Well, I'll keep looking for it.
Okay.
Take me a minute to sort through all of my email to find it. Here it is. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so it's also Powder Coat It Santa Cruz, spelled out. Powder Coat It Santa Cruz at gmail.com. That's Jeremy Martin. He'd have that information.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He's very knowledgeable. He's been doing this a while, and sort of it seems like a one-of-a-kind thing how he's restoring these cars. I know he'll have a lot to share, and he might have some great access to things, or even being able to custom design something for you.
And I got his email. His 9000 is still available in the classifieds. His phone number is 831-486-8255. 831-435-9558. I'll say it again, 831-435-9558.
Thank you. Got it.
You're welcome.
Scott, this is Alan in Virginia.
Hey, Alan, welcome.
Hey, Alan.
Thanks. I just also wanted to add Kelly Conate down in Alabama. He is excellent. I'm not sure if he would do it for somebody else, but he has a series of YouTube videos, and he does a really good job with leather restoration.
Yeah.
He also, there's a company, I can't think of the name of them off the top of my head. There's a company that he referred me to that makes a type of bolster cover that kind of just slips right over the bolsters on the VIG and then in any other seat for that matter. And I do know you can get I can't remember the gentleman's name that just asked the question about the VIG and skin covers, but they are available new through Oreo.
Really? That's wonderful.
Yeah, that was Martin in California. Yeah. So Kelly Conity is a longtime SaabNet.com member, and he is reachable at K Conity. That's KCONATYMD@gmail.com. KConityMD@gmail.com if you want to reach out to him. And I have seen his videos. He did a nice video on leather restoration. He was also, if you look up his name on the general bulletin board on SaabNet, he was on, I think it's Scotty's Repair. There's a popular YouTube channel.
Oh yeah.
He was featured on there talking about the classic 900, I believe, if I remember.
I remember this. Yeah, Scotty's a character. He's got like 2 million viewers. I know you're talking about.
Yeah.
Chris, do you want to say anything about tuning? Since some people might have tuned in about, tuning. Tell me if I'm correct. Are there 4 or 5 stages of tuning for your Saab?
It depends on, which company you go with.
Okay.
Some of them just have 3.
Okay.
I don't know. I've heard, and I don't really know that much about it, other than, people have told me, what they've gotten done.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll reschedule Jack. I don't know where he is. I hope Jack is okay. I'm sure he is.
Okay.
But he's in Kentucky. Jak Stoll is a longtime Saab master technician. He used to be out here in California, and then he went to the East Coast. He's not working he's working at a shop that doesn't specialize in Saabs right now, but for a long time he was doing tunes on Saabs, and he has a site, jakstollperf.com. It's actually hosted on the same server as the SaabNet site. And he knows quite a bit about tuning. So we'll have to reschedule him and get him back on here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
For
it's something that
tuning talk.
Yes, we'll. Yeah, it's interesting. Some people will write up the stuff, and they're asking all kinds of really intelligent questions. I'm also curious, what the possibilities are, and it's still discovering the world of Saab, still discovering this amazing car, and I would say lifestyle. It's really a lifestyle. All right, what's your question on your Saab, or your comment? What's the thing that you've really been curious about your Saab, or a comment about your lifestyles, or about your what got you into Saab? Open right now.
Scott, this is Morton in California. So I have a question on the AC system on a 9.5. Is that something you can get answered?
Let's hear it.
Yeah, please, Martin.
So here's the mystery, right? I'm asking this for my mom. She's back in Sweden, and she has a 2002 9.5 that she had since new, and it's driven by an old lady, so it's in pretty good condition. But it has an AC problem, and the AC tech wants to start replacing all the parts, and I'm thinking that's kind of, I don't really believe it, because the car, I know the car since it is new, and it still has pressure in the system, right? So there's pressure, so nothing is really leaking. I was thinking maybe just a recharge, but Here's the thing. They want to replace the condenser, which is, I think, the thing in the front of the AC system, right front of the car. And I'm a little bit suspicious because I think if the condenser was leaky or not working, there would be no pressure in the system. That's my experience with AC. But it has pressure. But I'm looking at the parts diagram, and there's a valve. I've never seen this on a condenser before, but there's a part number for a valve that sits on the condenser on this 9.5, and I'm just wondering, what does this valve do, and could it be that that's the issue?
What do you think, Chris?
Well, I'm not really aware of a valve, but there is a pressure sensor on there, and that all that does is shuts it off if the pressure gets too high. It's an electrical valve, or not a valve, excuse me. It's just a sensor. I mean, that's the only thing that I know of on the condenser. Then there's the receiver dryer that's hooked to the condenser.
Yeah.
But
I was looking at the parts diagram, and it says valve. Maybe it's maybe that's what it is. Let me see here what it says. It is AC valve, pressure valve. That's all it says on the microfiche.
there's an expansion valve, but that's on the evaporator. That could cause it not to get cold if that's bad.
So which part is sitting in the front, front of the car?
The front part is the condenser. That's the condenser.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if it still has enough pressure and it's not working, I mean, I guess you could have if there was if the fins were all worn and or gone in the condenser, wasn't transferring heat or something. Possibly, I guess that could be why you might want to replace it.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be really bad.
Yeah, it would be really bad. I haven't seen that.
This is not cooling at all.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, the only valve in the system that I know of is the expansion valve.
Would that sit on the condenser possibly?
No, that's on the evaporator. That's on the other end where where it goes into the car.
The firewall.
Into the cabin, on the firewall, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little mystery here. What's going on there? But,
yeah.
But,
Martin,
yeah.
I'd be curious. Through the years, I've spoken to you. By the way, I know a lot. I know some of your customers. You've worked on the cars. They're very appreciative. Just out of curiosity, when's the last time you were in Sweden?
Oh, myself? I'm not a mechanic, by the way. I'm an engineer, but I was.
Oh, okay. There's another mechanic. I thought you were him. Okay.
Yeah, no, there is. I know.
Yeah.
He's around here somewhere.
Oh, okay.
No, I was over for the big ski race in Sweden in March. So I've been over there.
Oh, I was curious. Do you still see a lot of Saabs on the road? And was curious about the culture of Saab in Sweden. Is that something that like your mom is a 2002?
Well, I mean, they're getting rarer, right? Just because the workshops and service and everything.
No, it's coming to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of Saabs. I mean, the culture of Saab and Volvo, I should say, also in Sweden is very strong. So I think they will be around for a long time.
Yes.
There are many Saab clubs and vintage Saab clubs, vintage Volvo clubs, etc.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I think I don't know. I guess the whole safety thing. There's so much about Saab that actually someone pulled up to me the other day and they said, "God, this is still one of the safest cars." And the people that come up to me sometimes, they're so appreciative of. So I have a 9.5, a 2004, and people are like, they still go by. This is an amazing car. It's the turbo is amazing. So still, there's I guess you could say in the if you will, the collective branding mind, for the people that know about Saab, they still consider it so amazing. I always say to them, look on SaabNet, because I feel like it's still a truly amazing investment. I'm still totally, when I see a rare 900 or a certain type of Arrow 9000, 9000. There was a couple of 9000s fairly recently that were in really good shape. I was just curious.
In Sweden, I think especially it's especially the convertibles. I would say that there are Swedish Saab convertible club. I think is around. I think that's kind of a special thing for Swedes because the convertible was. I mean, my brother had a few of those when we lived in Sweden. They were not really common in Sweden because they have winter and everything. But the 900 convertible, 93 convertible, they were highly, how can I say, respected because you know it's such a unique car and it's really made to be driven year round. Although it is a convertible, so it's kind of unique in that way. It's different from the German convertibles, which are, you know, not that good in the winter, right?
Yeah. Yes. No, and I'm still, like I said, I'm still very inspired by the Saab culture. I remember people driving in DC actually, the convertible in the winter, and we had a nice day. They would take the hood down, you know.
Oh, yeah,
all right, continue.
No, I had my 93 convertible, and I lived upstate New York, and it was very doable. A good winter day.
Open
question. Thank you, Martin. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Jack is actually trying to join. He's unfortunately right now he's stuck on video only. So I'll work on that a bit and see if we can't get audio for Jack.
Okay, great. Wow, this is like the legend. I've heard about him through the years. I've heard about this thing called tuning and realized that other people seem to have these questions. So I'm glad to catch up with Jack. Welcome to the Saab Travel Show. We got some upcoming shows and really love your questions. And I appreciate your retro questions too. Chris, what have you been finding? Any interesting stories from your end about people that are driving to see you in Dorset, Vermont? Are you finding there's still new people buying Saabs for the first time, or what's the culture been up? What's your experience right now in terms of people bringing their cars? You have a very loyal following. What about new people or any stories that you want to share?
No, really. I am picking up some new people, but that's just mainly because a lot of the dealers have gone out, and a lot of local places don't like to work on them. So yeah, I am getting some new customers, but right now with this virus thing, it's the appointments are starting to get pretty low right now. I think people are staying home, so it was busy this week, but next week's pretty sparse.
So I've got a Saab announcement. I'll just mention there's three places on SaabNet to get the latest information. I think the best place is if you use the general bulletin board. I really make sure that all the latest news, whatever's going on, gets posted there. And then at the top of any of the model bulletin boards, the general bulletin board, there's a site news. There's links in green across the top. They appear all the same across every bulletin board, but they announce stuff like the Saab Master Tech chat. There's a new site that came online a little while ago that has a workshop information system online. You can find a link to that on any of the bulletin boards, and any new features that that I code into the site get announced there too. You can also find the new information posted on the What's New page, which you can find through most any page on the site. There's a navigation bar at the bottom of every page of the site that also lists the new classifieds that have been posted. Also lists I think the last 25 or so bulletin board postings that have been, and then of course the homepage is also always a good place to find the current news. I just wanted to mention that.
Thanks, Scott. I want to ask Chris, and I'm open to anybody else's feedback, including you, Scott. For a while, there was many of us who would use eEuro, and it was reliable, and it was they always seemed to be, they had stuff from Germany, so the quality of the parts were good, and all of a sudden, I don't know what happened to you. I think maybe it was sold over. He was actually one of our supporters for a while. I'm forgetting his name. The original owner of eEuro. Now, Chris, any word on eEuro, any other company that you're impressed with that is carrying a high quality parts for Saab? Similar to Euro.
I mean, Euro, they still seem to have a lot of parts for Saab.
Mm-hmm.
I had a little problem with their service, but I don't know. Hopefully, that's all straightened out now.
Yeah, I just mentioned euro Parts has been it's almost 2 decades now of continuous sponsorship support of the Saab network. So they,
great.
I mean, certainly appreciate when people look to euro Parts for their Saab supplies, because they turn around and help me do stuff for the site. Like recently, I did upgrade. We moved. We were running on a Dell server for 7.5 years. The machine is up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and we I finally made a move to a new server, a new Dell server. Upgraded the memory, hard drive. We moved to a new operating system. It runs Red Hat Linux. Also became a secure site, got the security certificates installed and working. And they also help pay for, it has nice high bandwidth.
That's great.
So all the sponsors and the full site members on the Saab network do tons to help make me be able to work on the site as much as I do, and to do all those hardware upgrades. I also purchased another Dell server because I'm in the process of setting it up. It's a kind of a hot swap backup in case there's a hardware failure on the production server. I can just change the IP address on the backup server and move over to that, in just in a short amount of time. And then just mention another way to support SaabNet is with your Amazon purchases. You can see, if you go to the general bulletin board and look at those green links, there's a link that explains how you can create custom links for any products you recommend on Amazon or are linking to on the internet, and SaabNet will get a little piece of that purchase price. So thank you very much to full site members.
Yeah, thank you.
Sponsors.
Thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
I can hear you, Scott.
Okay. No, this is Jack.
Sorry,
Stoll.
Jack Stoll. Welcome.
So I want to apologize right off the bat. I kind of have a lot going on, both with the Corona stuff. I kind of got hit with something hard yesterday at work. They split the shop into 2 teams, and my working hours are now cut in half. And I was sort of blindsided by that yesterday, and that was very overwhelming and interfered with my ability to process normally. And then my wife and I are actually doing asbestos abatement in a house that we just bought. Actually, I just jumped out of my bunny suit and ran upstairs to join this. So, but I just want to apologize and let you guys know I'm very glad to be a part of this. And
Jack, we're glad to have you here. I'm really sorry to hear that the coronavirus is affecting you so directly. That's awful news. I hope it gets better soon. We do.
I just bought a second house, like across from my house, like across the backyards, right, with like a 3-car garage in the back, and a much bigger house, and didn't sell my old house before buying the new house because things were going really well financially, and this, kind of came at a bad time. So I am very overwhelmed.
Yeah,
but it'll pass,
Yeah, hoping it passes quickly.
It's been a. Anyway, I'm glad you're well, and I'm glad you called in. I know you've known Scott a long time. I'm Glenn Brooks. I host the show, Scott. And Chris Rizzon is our master mechanic. So a few shows ago, several people called in and kind of rang to my mind. There's this thing called tuning. Since you're an expert in that with years of experience, I'd love you to welcome to Saab Tuning 101. I'm new to it. I was excited about what it could do for my car, and share with us tell us what it means to be a Saab expert tuner, and then what does that mean for our Saabs? For instance, it would work on all kinds of Saabs, and give us an intro. Please.
And then also, Jack, I think Glenn, he mentioned a question earlier that I think is really good. How many stages of tuning are there, and what does each stage mean?
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, so sort of to start with, Jak Stoll Performance, that business hasn't really existed in close to 10 years now. I'm very good at what I do, and I understand engine management very well, and I also love Saabs quite a bit. And so at this point, that's part of why I bought this place with a 2-car and a 3-car garage, was hopefully to get started again at some point. Are you guys still there?
Yeah, we're here. Yeah.
I got a beep from my phone. But yeah, I currently work for BMW as a technician, and it's a steady job, but it's boring. Definitely.
Love your honesty.
Yeah, but I have a good job and whatever, but it is very boring. And but I guess as far as tuning Saabs, how I got into it was I was given an old SPG, like an 85 SPG, and this was maybe around 2002 or something like that. And I wanted to, when I got the car, somebody had pulled the turbo off of it. I guess the turbo had failed and was causing some oil burning or something like that. And they actually took the turbo off and welded right angle pipes down to the exhaust and bypassed the turbo altogether. It was horrible. And, and I took this car as a stock car and, got it back up to stock. And then I was like, wow, it's a turbo car. What can I do to make it faster? And up until that point, I'd only done normal repair, and maintenance on cars. I've been in the trade for a very long time, almost 40 years now. I've been a technician, and I think I'm good at what I do, and I'm very dyslexic and kind of see things in pictures and kind of see the big picture of how systems work and how the bits and pieces contribute to the whole thing. And so I just started asking questions, and in fact, I got on the SaabNet and started asking questions. And what happened was, very quickly, I realized that what was going on at the time were pretty much Band-Aid type of tuning. People using rising rate fuel pressure regulators and things like that. And so, the first thing I did was I started monitoring all the inputs and outputs. So I had an oscilloscope and I looked at the inputs to the engine management. So you have a load input and you have RPM, right? And you have a coolant temp sensor and an oxygen sensor and a throttle position sensor. These are all inputs that tell the control unit what's going on with the engine and what you're requesting of it, basically, And then the outputs are, at least on that system, it was only a fuel output. The ignition was very separate, but on a lot of engine management systems, the outputs are, controlling ignition timing, sometimes boost control, fueling, right? And trionic engine management systems, it controls all three. And so, by editing the file, you can get it to do different things, based on those inputs and requests, right? So you can get it to deliver a little more fuel. You can get it to push a little more boost. You can back timing off to compensate for more boost, And so, the first files that I worked with were 2.2 LH files used in early classic 900s. And I think that was the first digital engine management system ever out in an OE release, on a car. And the total file size, including a little bit of OBD, onboard diagnostics, was 4 KB, right? The total file size. And it had some odd architecture, which would take a while to explain, and I don't need to bore you with that, but it was a very weird file, and hard to figure out. And I got a little bit of help, and I figured out some stuff on my own, and I was able to start tuning that system. And so that's where I started with it. And basically, with Saabs, particularly more modern Saabs,
Yes.
your best starting point is probably software, because most of the systems are, have targeting and limitation. The mapping is set up, for target values that you're trying to achieve, and then limits. If you exceed these limits, then the thing shuts down or shuts off fuel or whatever it has to do to try and save the engine. And so often by just putting on an exhaust or an intake, you might make things a little more efficient. Like it can basically, move the same amount of air, maybe with a little bit less boost pressure or something like that. But it's not, it will adapt back and basically, run at stock performance. It might feel better for a couple days or something like that. But, I know with like Trionic 5, because it was very good, and Trionic 7 are, with the ion sensing, direct ignition cassette, they were very good at sensing pre-ignition. You could put software on the car that exceeded the hardware that you had on the car, and then add hardware later and then readapt it, and it would sort of learn up to what you had in the car, to a degree, right? I mean, you wouldn't put like stage 5 software with, stock injectors, because it can't like learn that far about fueling and stuff like that.
Right.
But software is a good starting point. You can put like a stage 2 or a stage 3, I would call a stage 1 software only. And I would call a stage 2 like, exhaust and software. And I would call like a stage 3 like a better flowing intake, an exhaust and software. A 4 might be like an intercooler, better flowing intake and exhaust and software. And then I would consider like a stage 5, maybe like a turbocharger upgrade and injectors added to the other components in a stage 4, and, and so on. And, I guess, you could call something a stage 6, but after that point, you're just basically going with, a larger turbocharger, bigger injectors, everything just becomes bigger because you're trying to move more air basically, And
is the performance significant? Like, do people notice a world of, like, so, okay, you have stage 1. Is it very noticeable at stage 1? And does it get only more noticeable up to stage 5 in terms of performance? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. On Trionic cars, like Trionic 5 cars, you would, just by getting the boost pressure up a few pounds, even if you were only making like 3 or 4 more pounds of boost pressure, and even if it was pulling that boost back higher in the RPM, because the exhaust was a little restrictive and it was picking up some pre-ignition or whatever, that bump in torque kind of low. So often they will adapt that way, where you'll get a surge of torque, sort of low in the RPM, but the thing won't really pull higher in the RPM because the exhaust is restrictive. And the exhaust is a great way to get rid of heat, right? A lot of heat. Yeah. That's actually why internal combustion engines are so horribly inefficient, because they throw away so much heat right out the exhaust and through the radiator, right? When I did electric motors R&D for Joe Ben Bevert, which is now doing like Joby Aviation with Toyota, and we were very concerned about temperatures, right? Because when when a motor starts to become a heater, you're throwing energy away into the air, right? Instead of using it to make mechanical force. But that's why internal combustion engines are like in the 30s, as far as efficiency goes. They're 40% efficient, and we were getting like in the 80s on 80s or 90s with electric motors.
All right, I have a question. I want to open it up because I'm sure people are going to be really curious. So the efficiencies, does that mean when you would tune an engine, you get better gas efficiency? Would gas efficiency also be a factor? Would like people get a better mileage?
Right. So the biggest, and I know people always like prodded me about this, right?
Yes. Yes.
So yes, if you drive the car easy, right, and
Yes.
and you give people a little more ignition timing, and you're careful about the fueling and part throttle, you can actually lean a car out a little bit, and you can give them a little more timing. And with the use of the catalytic converter, you can clean up the NOx emissions that are created by running a little more timing and a little less fuel, right? Part throttle. So a light load driving, if you're careful with your right foot, and you can actually make an engine a little more efficient, by being adding a little ignition timing, and it's going to adapt and try and go to 14.7 to 1 basically, but you can mess with the transitional fueling a little bit. Probably the biggest increase in efficiency is just from ignition timing, making the engine produce a little more torque. But like I said, taking fuel away and adding timing both raise combustion chamber temperatures, and this creates NOx, which is an emissions problem. And so the catalytic converter is good at cleaning that up. And when I was tuning Saabs, I would not sell people catless downpipes unless I knew the car was track only use.
Okay.
So you can do that a bit. And I would say to people that if you're really looking for efficiency, your driving habits are the biggest factor in the efficiency of your vehicle. And some vehicles are more apt to give better efficiency. For example, I drift a 1989 325i that I turbocharged, and it has probably makes 350 at the rear wheels or something like that. But because of the cylinder head design and the intake and the fact that it's geared pretty low, my car does not get good fuel mileage. And I go through, it's very easy that, the original equipment engine management systems that I tuned, 10 years ago were very difficult to tune, right? The engineers that design these systems are not designing them to be tuned by individuals like myself and other tuners, right? They're trying to lock people out. What's on my car is very easy to tune. It's designed to be tuned. And so I can mess with it with my phone, just sitting in traffic or whatever, I can make all kinds of adjustments. I have a Bluetooth connection to my telephone. It's wireless. It's very easy. And my car, maybe gets in the low 20s for mileage. And I remember, for example, I had a guy come to me when I was in North Carolina with a Vigan that I did like a stage 5 setup for him.
Oh, wow.
And we had some engine problems with his car, as it turned out. I mean, he broke a piston like 5 minutes into adaption, and it turned out that he had like a bad air mass meter and a bad direct ignition cassette at some point on this Vigan, which is a death sentence for the B235, right? They would crack pistons with stock software when that combination of problems occurred. And, he probably just had some damage, but I gave him my car, this black car that I had that made about 380 at the wheels. And he drove it back to Washington, D.C. while I put his car back together, while I built an engine for him. And he drove it home at about 80 miles an hour and said it got about 30 miles to the gallon going 80 miles an hour,
It's pretty good.
And so, like I said, adding some timing, can definitely give you efficiency if you're steady with the pedal. And, turbochargers do another thing as well. Particularly smaller turbochargers will spool up at cruise, and you may be at atmospheric pressure at, whatever it is, 2,500 RPM on the highway. Your intake manifold, a lot of what makes engines inefficient is something called pumping loss. And that's when the piston moves away from the cylinder head. If there's vacuum on top of the piston, this is drag on the engine, right? It's like it's a loss. So this pumping loss that occurs in naturally aspirated engines mostly on a turbocharged engine, particularly with a smaller turbo that will spool up under light loads and at lower RPMs, if your intake manifold pressure is at atmospheric pressure or even a little positive, you don't have that pumping loss, right? So the engine's turning more freely, and this gives you quite a bit of efficiency as well, you know? So there are many sort of contributing factors, you know, like diesel engines often, when you think about older diesel engines, right? They all got really good fuel mileage. Well, didn't have throttles, right? I have a 12-valve Cummins truck. It doesn't have a throttle at all, like a throttle plate at all, you know? So there's no pumping loss there. Plus it's a turbocharged engine, and, you know, so it's pretty efficient, you know?
I got it. Hey, let's. I have some more questions, but I want to open it up. First of all, I'm really happy you're here today. I've been hearing so many. You're a little bit of a legend in the tuning community, so welcome. I'm very happy you're here today, Jack. Yeah. So okay, let's open it up. You guys, stage 1 to stage 5. What's your experience with tuning? What's your questions for Jack? Jack Stoll is with us today.
This is Paul out in Buffalo. I own another Saab 9.3 2007 with a 6-cylinder 284 engine. I actually purchased it a couple of years ago. And the previous, one owner had tuned the car, put a BSR, it's I guess a European tuning company.
Yeah.
Stage 1 on it. He had upgraded the exhaust as well as a physical change. And put cold air intake on it with a kit that BSR sells. The question I guess I have, and I asked about the transmission and what it can handle, and what the weak link in the chain was, and an experienced Sauber from a call last month said, nah, the transmission should be able to handle the increase, supposed increase from 250 horses out to a little under 290. The torque, though, torque was up to, supposedly they rate the torque increase up to 352 on the foot-pounds.
Yes.
My question, one thing I've experienced, I've taken it, I drive it very often, kind of a daily driver, plus I have taken it for an occasional track day. I've noticed that, I don't know if this is just the engine because of the heat issue in the tight engine compartment, or the tuning, I seem to go through coils quickly, as well as spark plugs. And I'll take any suggestion you might have as to what equipment is, what spark plugs are the best to use on a tuned vehicle.
So there's a lot of debate about spark plugs. I actually just went through some of this with some guys on a group on a Facebook group actually. There's like a guild of EFI tuners on there, and what worked well for me on Trionic engine management cars were always a standard electrode plug, right? And there's a lot of people go back and forth about iridium plugs and platinum plugs and stuff about the tips of the plug and it being small and leading to pre-ignition and all this stuff. And I'm actually a little baffled by all of it. I thought that I had a good understanding of it. I had read some very simplified information by a guy named Jacobs, Dr. Jacobs of Jacobs Electronics, who built some MSD systems, in the, I guess, 80s and 90s or something like that. He also did the ignition systems for the big three, like Chrysler, GM, and Ford, like the early breakerless ignitions. I think he designed all three of them, like GM, HEI with that huge distributor. But anyway, I think that my understanding of it was a little simplified. But what I can tell you is that my experience has been, and I will continue and run them in my car, in my drift car, that I track drive and everything, basically are standard electrode plugs. And if your car runs a little more boost, you want to gap your plugs down a little bit. It makes, so when you have coil on plug, when the coils are in the cylinder head, whether it's a DI cassette or they're individual plugs, like in the later, Saab GM, stuff, the coils are getting very hot just because they're in the cylinder head. And then the more demand you place on them by having wider gaps, and then also, having the atmosphere, more compressed in the combustion chamber, it makes it much harder, for the spark to jump the gap. So gapping the plugs down a little bit and try it, try a standard electrode plug. I'm not into gimmicky plugs. I don't know, I know E3 puts out a lot of advertising. There's Split Fire and all these different spark plug companies. And I actually don't spend a lot of time experimenting around trying to figure that stuff out. I like NGK spark plugs. I always have used them. Saab always recommended them in their engines. And I always liked standard electrode plugs. And I always gap them down a little bit, to try and keep the coils cooler. And then as far as the transmission, question goes, I think, so in Trionic 7 cars, like people's automatic Biggins and stuff, I remember being very aggressive with tuning in those cars and making a great deal of torque. And I'm not sure if it may be that the transmission control unit monitored slip in the transmission, because I know there are multiple like turbine, or at least an input and output turbine speed sensor, and that it does do gear ratio monitoring. And they also use transmissions, all modern transmissions, vary line pressure based on they vary line pressure, based on inputs. So if there's slippage, they can crank the line pressure up a little bit. So there's some adaptation of the transmission itself, right? And you can actually go into the software and change values for line pressure and increase line pressure in an automatic transmission. That's probably beyond the scope of what BSR does with their stuff. But what I can tell you as far as like tuning Trionic 7 stuff was that when I got really aggressive with boost pressure in automatic transmission Trionic 7 cars, they would start to shift so hard that I remember getting the belt to slip on shifts. Like you would hear a screech from the belt, because the alternator would back drive the belt on shifting, right? Because the alternator is sort of like a flywheel with a small pulley, right? And you get that thing spun up, and then it bangs a gear, and suddenly the engine's RPMs drop. The alternator is going to want to continue to go the same speed, and so you get this like screech on shifting, from the belt being back driven by the alternator. And other later alternators, had actually clutches in the alternator pulley, right? That alleviated some of that, and like belt flapping at idle at low speed on 4 cylinders, right? A lot of that was a problem with Mercedes turbo supercharged 4 cylinders, where that clutch would fail on the alternator, and they would bang the tensioner really bad until it failed or whatever. But yeah, so I think at reasonable levels, like a stage 1, even stage 3 software, where you start to get pretty aggressive, like, I wouldn't really worry about those transmissions. One thing that you could do if you beat on it, if you go on the track, would be, potentially to monitor the transmission temperature. I don't know if there are devices for your car that allow you to break into, some of the, CAN stuff or other, information stuff through the OBD link or something, like looking at live data. You could add an external oil cooler for the transmission so that's a big concern, right? Is transmission fluid temperature, and
my vehicles are manual, so it's really my 2 feet.
I see. Oh, so it's a manual transmission that you're concerned about the torque on?
Just a concern, when you're boosting the torque output of the engine from the stock of 250, 260 foot-pounds up to 350, I wondered, okay, where have I moved the weakest link in
so that's all driving habit stuff. So like I used to get crazy with manual transmission cars, like making 450 foot-pounds of torque plus, almost 500. So I had my black car, I put nitrous on it, and I ran sort of a medium-sized turbo, like I think it was a GT 3271R. It had sort of a big turbine housing. The compressor wheel was like 71 millimeter X-Deucer wheel. It made 380 at the wheels without nitrous, and about 480 at the wheels with nitrous. And so the torque numbers at the engine were quite a bit higher. It was at least 500, maybe 525 foot-pounds of torque at the crankshaft. And I never broke a transmission with any of these cars that I daily drove. And I also used to do these like cryo-treated and shot-peened gear sets, and I would build transmissions for other people. And I had this one guy who would break transmissions. And, when I built these transmissions, I did not warranty them, because I knew if somebody's buying a cryo-treated and shot-peened gear set transmission, that they're not going to be nice to the transmission. They want something that they can be really abusive with, right? So this guy brought me back a couple of these transmissions that I built for him to be rebuilt, with the understanding that he was paying to have them rebuilt. And I started talking to him about driving habits, and like, shock loading. So shock loading, for one, with transmission longevity, oil's everything. So in Saab transmissions, I always ran Redline lightweight shockproof gear oil. I swear by this stuff.
No, really?
It's, oil is everything, right? So,
that's a question I have right in front of me here. And Chris Rizzon, our master Saab mechanic, if you want to step in and make any comments, please. I'm just going to, so last week, or actually the last time we did our show, David Dickinson mentioned Royal Purple gear oil, and there was a lot of feedback about that. That was interesting, because as we're doing this broadcast for the Saab Travel Show, there's a lot of people wondering, does it really make a big difference? And they sent me the EP3 spark plugs, by the way, and my mechanic, I think Chris told me to be careful of those, that sometimes people could be messing around with spark plugs and it could be throwing off the whole car. So that was interesting. So what about oil? So what's your experience with oils?
So just the thing on the spark plugs, like the engine management system was designed, at least Trionic 5 and Trionic 7, right? I didn't really tune T8 much. I got kind of out of it by that time.
Okay.
But any ion sensing engine management system is relying on the spark plug, the values that it's getting from ion sensing, right? And they basically tune that to a particular type of plug. So I wouldn't screw around with spark plugs too much on those cars. Like I said, my experience, my personal experience, right, is that using a standard electrode plug, sometimes I would go I think they were like BPR 6ES or 7ES, and I would run like the little bit colder plug if I was running more boost pressure, and I would gap them down slightly. I think on the really hot stuff, like when I was messing around with nitrous and stuff like that, I found an 8ES plug that I actually called NGK and got the tip height and thread length and a few other things, and found an application that came from I believe an Ecotech engine or something like that. I don't remember. It was a long time ago, but I stretched it with that. But my advice to most people is stick with an OE type spark plug. NGK are good plugs. I had good luck with standard electrode plugs and gap them down. And then I never really used Royal Purple gear oil but I promise you that like everybody who's in motorsports, who's racing stuff, particularly when it comes to transmissions, they're using high quality synthetic gear oils that are designed to have a lot of pressure, you know, to maintain a film thickness between components with a lot of pressure on them, right? So, you know, running, I wouldn't run like on classic 900s, right? They basically ran engine oil on the transmission, right? So people ran that oil. Yeah. I didn't run engine oil in my classic 900 transmissions. I mean, I went through a lot of classic 900 transmissions. But I even still, right, using a lightweight shockproof gear oil. Yeah, those transmissions shifted a little hard in the cold when you ran that, you know, because it was a little thicker than engine oil. But particularly with new gen 900s and, you know, 9.3s and 9.5s and all that stuff, you know, I had really, really good luck with that, with those oils, using very high quality oils. And, you know, actually see it in my drift car. So I run like a welded differential on the back of it, like a 410 gear ratio differential in the back of the car. And because they don't make spools for them and you don't want a limited slip when you're drifting, it causes problems. But I run a lightweight shockproof in the transmission. And just because I was sort of flushing stuff out from welding it, right? There's some material that's left when you weld it. I've had regular, but a very thick oil in the rear differential. And when I come off the track from the vent tube at the top of the differential, I see some oil emerging, right? And I believe that this is because it's getting very hot and it's, you know, expanding and it's, you know, maybe even turning to gas a little bit and kind of, you know, but it's coming out of the vent there. And I'm actually going to go with like a heavy shockproof gear oil in the differential. And I'm actually curious to see if that subsides, you know, after track events, you know.
Chris Rizzon's with us. He's not just a certified Saab mechanic for 35 years. He races. Chris, any comments on any of this conversation from your daily experience and what you're curious about, the conversation of tuning and oils and plugs, anything that Jack said that kind of intrigued you or you want to add to?
Chris, tell us what you race. This is the first time I've heard that you race.
I think years ago, Jack may have done a chip for my 88 SPG for my ice racer. I think that's where I got it from. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's worked really well. Transmissions, they don't stand up too well after a while, but everything he says is very reasonable. I agree with all of it.
Anything about racing? Scott was wondering about what's your racing background, Chris?
That's it. I mean, pretty much just autocrosses, a few hill climbs, and I did some rallycross and just the ice racing. But this year, they didn't have any ice racing. There wasn't enough ice.
Right.
Yeah. I wanted to go snowboarding and stuff with my family over this winter and wasn't able to get out to it, you know?
Right. All right. I got it. Okay. So when you go to the auto parts store, Jack, there's a lot of things that says products to increase your octane. There's booster products. Oh, the questioner is actually, do you recommend that always people use high test? Or for instance, could they use mid-grade or regular? What's your simple for those who?
The best fuel that you can put in your car is what you want to put in your car. Okay. Period. And you know, I mean, if you drive a Honda that's naturally aspirated with very low compression, you know, that's maybe a different story. You know, they do kind of in those engines, but keep in mind, and this is sort of theoretical, right? And I've not personally done any testing that is conclusive, but theoretically speaking, when you have an engine management system that detects pre-ignition and is capable of, you know, it has high and low detonation fueling and ignition mapping, or other variations of an ability to adapt or, you know, detect pre-ignition and change fueling and timing based on knock, right? Which speaks for all modern engine management, you know, basically. When you run better quality fuel, you have less pre-ignition, right? So the timing, it can adapt the timing a little higher, and it can also run on the low detonation fuel mapping more, which means a little bit leaner, right? That, you know, I mean, so when you have a little more timing and a little less fuel, it kind of goes back to the first part of our conversation where we were talking about efficiency, right? That's exactly what you want to do when you want to increase fuel mileage, is like increase the ignition timing a little bit and take away a little bit of fuel, you know, to a reasonable degree. And this increases efficiency. So from that so there's that standpoint of efficiency, and there's also engine longevity, right? And the, you know, the life of the tune-up components, you know, like spark plugs and oil, right? If you're running, you know, so, you know, lower octane fuel, basically the flame front push on the piston is for a shorter duration of time. It's more of like a bang, you know, like a flash on the piston. And then you have like high octane fuels and racing fuels that have a considerably longer push. And then, you know, diesel is sort of rated differently, but has quite a bit longer duration. The flame front duration is slower and happens for a longer period of time. And so, you know, with you know, higher octane fuels, you can actually produce more torque, right? Because you have the flame front slower, and it's pushing on the piston for a longer period of time. And it's, you know, when the combustion is going whap on top of the piston, you may be having like a short duration, high pressure combustion event, right? And you might be blowing a little more carbon past the rings into your oil, right? And this is all just sort of from my head, right? But you know, I think that
I get the sense you know so many nuances. Jak Stoll's with us today. We're going to welcome you back again. You guys have any questions before our session ends? Say any questions, any burning questions about tuning, oils, additives, anything.
Yeah, this is Martin. I have a question on tuning. So if I have I think it's a B207, it's a newer 9.3. If I do a stage 1 on that car, will I be able to pull a trailer? Is the trailer pulling included in the mapping, or does it work?
I don't think that you're going to have any trouble pulling a trailer. My only concern about pulling things with a tuned car is if you try to pull it, you know, heavier things or push the car harder, right? So you still have to be very gentle with the car when towing. So, you know, if the car is capable of making more power, and it is truly a stage 1 software where you're going to run basically just you know, I don't know who it is, you know, if it's BSR or whoever, or what their requirements are. I would call a stage 1 software only, and a stage 2 like software and exhaust. But if all the components are basically stock on the car, and you're using software to increase boost pressure, you know, your exhaust gas temperatures are going to go up, and your combustion chamber temperatures are going to go up. And this is totally fine for short bursts, right? If you're, you know, driving aggressively through traffic, or you're on the track and then, you know, you do a lap and you get off or whatever, or a few laps, and there's times where you're on the throttle and times when you're off the throttle. But when you're towing, right, you have a bigger load for, you know, I don't know what you tow, but for, you know, an extended period of time. And if you're not gentle with your car, you know, then yes, you can break things. But I don't think that would be necessarily related to the tuning. So like if I sold somebody tuning and they towed something and broke something on their car, I would attribute that more to the driving habit than the software, you know?
Okay. Good to know.
All right, we just have a few more moments. Jack, why don't you give out your email and your contact or website? So I know you're going to intrigue a lot of people. You're like you're another guru in this area of tuning. And then I have two quick questions from a couple of the listeners, but please give out your contact.
Okay, so my email address is all lowercase, JAKSTOLLPERF, short for performance, @gmail.com. I actually put a little thing. I'm not a huge Facebook guy. I just put like drifting stuff up there. I don't put family or personal things up there. But but there is like a Jak Stoll performance page on there on Facebook, and you can go to that and contact me through that. And then also Scott has been kind enough forever, Scott Paterson, to host the Jak Stoll performance website, and that is jakstollperf.com, JAKSTOLLPERF.com. And I'm happy to answer questions. Honestly, it got to the point where that the recession in 2008 and 2009 kind of took me out of the business. And I am looking to and setting up to start again. And it would make me very happy to be able to cater, to people with Saabs and other stuff too. I mean, part of my problem was that I backed myself into a corner, in a niche market and with the few people in that niche market that really wanted to go fast. But, I love Saabs, I always really have, and it would make me very happy to be a part of this community again.
I want to invite you and have you be part of our team and forward your success in this and have you back on again. So I want to welcome you. I have two questions from the people that people have emailed me. I want to ask you these two questions, and then I want to let Chris Rizzon from Dorset, Vermont. I want you to be able to give out your website number for anybody who wants a master Saab tech who's been doing it 35 years. Chris is our co-host here. Chris, why don't you give out your website and phone, and then anything you wanted to, if you had a final comment or question for Jack as well.
Well, the website is just rizzonsaab.com.
Rizzonsaab.com. And why don't you give out your number? What the heck? Some people like phone numbers.
Yep. 802-325-3827.
And any of you guys who want to be in touch with Jack or Chris, I know you could reach out to Scott and myself. And my direct number is 413-345-3747. I also review all kinds of things in this field. I did review these, I think they call the E3 spark plugs. They have quite an amazing write-up. But from my own research, we're talking to Saab guys, they warned me against using them. 413-345-3747. Okay, our two burning questions here. So in a world where everybody says they have the best synthetic oil, including places like Amsoil and Royal Purple and Castro, and some people say it makes a world of difference. What do you recommend in terms of oil as it relates to performance and longevity of the engine? Anything that Jak Stoll is going to say, you know what, this is the one that I noticed in my experience with tuning and performance, because some people unfortunately have blown their engines and wonder sometimes, is it the oil? Did I use the wrong oil? What's your take on that?
So most of what I have run and really turned up a lot are a little bit older engines.
Okay.
But and in my drift car, I mean, this car, gets bounced off the rev limit, full power, sliding, big sweepers and all this stuff. This is not a Saab, but I use the same oil in Saab, and I'm not sure that this is actually a good recommendation. But what I run is truck oil.
Yes.
I run Shell Rotella or Dello 400 15W40 in really high performance engines because it has a lot of detergents in it, a lot of truck engines are turbocharged, you know, so it's like really geared towards turbocharged stuff. I remember, you know, I had some friends in Sweden when I was doing a lot of tuning, and they ran into some problems using lighter weight, like Mobil 1 synthetics, and under prolonged periods with like poor cooling, like on the dyno and stuff like that. If you're doing extended dyno tuning and stuff, they had engines come apart because the oil would get so thin, you know. So my recommendation for most would be to do research. You know, there's a lot of arguments about oil and go, you know, this and that. But there are a lot of like case studies where people have actually done like metallurgical analysis, like have oil samples taken and sent to labs where they looked at what was left in the oil and all that stuff. And so I think that doing your own personal research is a good idea. What I tend to do is like every 2 track days. So I daily, this E30 that I daily drive it and I track it. And so I may change the oil like 5 or 6 times a year, right? Like every 2 track days, I'll dump the oil and put clean oil in it. It's always been my understanding that particulate, like carbon particulate from blow-by, from combustion, enters the oil and you know, basically loads the oil up with an abrasive material which wears things out. And I think that the number one you know thing for engine longevity is basically clean oil, right? Yeah. So you know, I'll run non-synthetic oil but keep it very clean. But you know, like industry standard these days, you know, working for BMW, I think there's some cars that have like 14 or 15,000 mile like service intervals on oil, which just like blows my mind. And I realize that OEs do this for the purpose of making the cars seem like they need less, you know, to make it more appealing to their clientele, right? Oh, this car doesn't need that much. But on Saab's, on at least on BMW's behalf, you know, they actually sell like warranty maintenance packages, right? Where, you know, you buy it in the beginning and you come in at these mileage intervals and they do the oil changes and they don't really cost the customer anything. And they're still doing them at these crazy, you know, intervals. But
it's kind of like the Mobil 1 20,000, you know, mile once a year change. Okay, last question, promise, and we'll get you back on, Jack. Welcome to the Saab Travel team here. What about Rotella 6? I think it's Rotella 6, full synthetic. I think it's a 0 or 540. I know a lot of people are very happy with that in the Saab community, and some people are confused because it says for diesel engines. Is that what's your take on using something else? So Rotella 6, I think it's the Shell product. Is that a good oil?
I've not used it, but I use Shell Rotella I used it when I was tuning Saabs. All the fast stuff that I built, I recommended it to customers. And I beat the hell out of many engines with that oil in it. And if they make a higher quality oil that's in synthetic oil, I say that their product's good. Like I stand behind my personal experience with Shell Rotella has been good. And if they make a higher quality oil than what I've done, I'm just cheap because I change the oil. You know, I change the oil a lot and, you know, whatever. So I put cheap oil in my thing.
All right. Well, thanks for admitting that. No. Hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jack. Pleasure meeting you. We'll have you back on again. I want to thank Rizzon, Scott, and I thank all of you guys for asking your questions and welcome to our ongoing conversations and resources here on the Saab Travel Show. Scott, I want to turn it over to you. Thank you. It's an honor being your friend and doing this so long now, and I'm still wildly enthusiastic about our Saab community.
Yeah, it's a great community full of wonderful people. And everybody please stay healthy, And thanks
Yes.
for joining us. We'll get around to I'll get around to getting this recording posted up on the site, and we'll get around to scheduling the next chat as well. Thank you so much.